Reaching out for help is a sign of strength and not weakness. Let this incident motivate all of us to take down our barriers and treat struggling individuals who step forward with care and compassion.
Following the River Valley High School tragedy, Minister Chun says there's always more we can and must do when it comes to mental health.
10 new COVID-19 clusters in Singapore, including one that's linked to a GP's clinic, will be getting an expert's take on that.
And investigations are underway after a 17-year-old died from his injuries when a basketball structure fell on him last night. Hello, you're watching The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Olivia Quay with Haryanto Diman.
The River Valley High School incident was addressed in Parliament today, with Education Minister Chun delivering a ministerial statement. Since a Sec 1 boy was allegedly killed on campus by a Sec 4 student on July 19th, about 540 of the school's staff and students have sought psychological support through a caring actions in response to an emergency or care post.
This was set up in the school to provide those who needed immediate help to walk in.
Since the care post was opened in the school, about 540 staff and students have sought support there. Most heartening, within the school community, the students initiated their own small acts of kindness. Some distributed small gifts and snack packs. Others sent encouraging notes and sweet treats. Students are looking out not just for themselves, but also their teachers, and urging them to seek help where needed. The School Advisory Committee, Parent-Teacher Association, parents and alumni, as well as counsellors from social service agencies and community, have also rallied around River Valley High School. This includes the counsellors on standby from Boon Lay. All these speak volumes of the compassion and strength of the River Valley High School community.
Well, Mr. Chan also talked about the larger school system and how it's been affected by the ongoing pandemic. Amid schooling disrupted because of the Delta variant, he said that students taking the O, N and A levels this year will not be tested on some topics covered towards the end of their syllabus.
All other students will also have the scope of their year-end exams reduced. Mr. Chan outlined the impending support measures in schools, which include the resumption of CCAs.
First, we will strengthen the support network in our schools. All teachers will receive enhanced professional development on mental health literacy as a baseline. This will further strengthen our ability to identify and support students in need. We also aim to deploy more than 1,000 teacher counsellors in the next few years. This is an increase from the over 700 teacher counsellors we have currently deployed in schools. For our students, we will bring back CCAs for secondary schools and pre-universities within the next few weeks, as more students complete their vaccinations. We are currently putting our plans together on how CCA can be conducted safely within national safe management measures. We will also dedicate more time and attention to checking in on the well-being of our students regularly. Schools currently have orientation programs for new students at the start of every school year. Henceforth, teachers will devote time at the start of every school term to check in on the well-being of their students and guide them to know how, where, and when to get help.
On top of better mental health support, Mr. Chan called for a more caring and nurturing environment for the youth because their everyday challenges are intensified by the internet, where comparisons with others are constant.
Well, this adds another layer of social pressure for young people who are already facing expectations of themselves and their parents, as well as the difficulties of coping with the rigors of Singapore's education system.
As parents, we all want what is best for our children. As they learn to navigate and face tomorrow's challenges on their own, it is not easy to know when to nudge them, when to stretch them, when to help them, or when to let go. Within our own families, we can all spend a bit more time listening to our children's thoughts and feelings. Let them share with us what they find stressful. Give them the space to process their emotions. Let us walk alongside them as they grow and learn to handle their new challenges. We can have more frank conversations with our children and families on the definition of success. As a parent myself, I've come to realize that success must be defined by helping my children to realize their own potential, develop their own strengths, and ultimately be confident in themselves. Success cannot, should not, and must not be the constant need to be compared with someone else and having to live up to someone else's image.
You can watch Minister Chan's full address in Parliament on our YouTube channel.
But here with us now is psychologist Dr. Geraldine Tan. She's the director and principal psychologist of the Therapy Room. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Tan. Minister Chan spoke for just under an hour, giving a timeline of what happened at River Valley High School, but more importantly, calling for more to be done to support the youth. What were the most important points to you, Doctor?
I think, first of all, good evening, and I'm really glad to be back today. He did the most difficult job of addressing the nation to have us face up to it. Really proud of what the nation is doing, rather than hiding from it and running away from it. I also hear that the students use the run, hide, and tell lockdown. It means that something in our school system is working. Very proud of the students that have done that also. I agree with him about the support that is needed and how fast it's being rolled out. I would encourage all schools to also have their own counselors stand by and to reach out to external resources if necessary, because there would be secondary trauma, there would be vicarious trauma from the teachers, all these very essential to address. And also I'm hearing that there will be PTSD. He did not explicitly say that, but I'm glad that he acknowledged that. And we know that PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder can last for a really long time.
That's right. So, Dr. Tan, how significant was Mr. Chan's statement today in how educators and parents address the mental health of our youth moving forward?
There is movement, there is acknowledgement that we do need to pay attention to how stressed the children are in the school system. The education itself, does put a lot of pressure, but he also addressed the expectations placed on the children. So this is something that we know and we've spoken about, but to hear it so publicly by a minister, I think that's very important, that we need to know that, our children are not defined by our grades. I know, cliched as it sounds, this is something that I want to remind all parents and teachers, that our children are not defined by grades. So it's wonderful that he has, addressed it. I do want to applaud the competency of the educators that they stood by the school in every single school, the principals who have a lot of weight on their shoulders. I think this period of time has been extremely trying for them. And I'm so glad that he addressed them and gave them a platform to talk about things.
Well, Dr. Tan, it's great to hear your thoughts on what happened today. Thank you so much for coming on the show. That was the Therapy Room's director and principal psychologist, Dr. Geraldine Tan.
Earlier, Minister Chun also outlined the timeline of the River Valley High School incident, adding that not all details can be shared as the case is before the court.
Here's what we know so far. On July the 19th at 11:35 a.m., a group of students encountered the Sec 4 student outside a toilet. He was holding an axe and asked them to call the police. The students returned to their classroom and informed their teacher.
The Sec 4 student then asked another group of students in the classroom next to the toilet to call the police. Those students went into their classrooms, locked the doors and called their form teachers for help.
A teacher arrived at the scene and told the Sec 4 boy to put down the axe, which he did. He was then escorted to a meeting room. Other teachers called the police and checked the toilet.
About 10 minutes later, the police arrived and took the student into custody. Police officers and SCDF paramedics found a 13-year-old student lying motionless in the toilet with multiple wounds. They pronounced him dead.
Once the situation was under control, the principal broke the news to her staff, then spoke to the students and asked them to contact their parents to tell them that they're safe. The principal then spoke to the group of students most affected by the incident.
At 3:15 p.m., the school began to dismiss students as well as stationed teachers at the school gates to speak to parents and students.
And in the evening, parents were informed that a student had died. The school asked parents to monitor the well-being of their children, and worried parents were encouraged to contact the form teachers.
When it comes to enhancing security at schools, Mr. Chan noted that these measures will be balanced without losing the sense of safety, trust and homeliness of the school environment.
In our efforts to enhance security at our schools, we do not want to compromise the quality of school experience for our staff and students. I've asked myself this difficult question. What would it feel like if I must empty my pockets, be frisked, and have my bag checked before stepping through my house door or school gate? Also, how would my fellow family members and students feel? How would we relate to one another in such an environment? Will it still be home? Or will it create in me a siege mentality? None of us wish to return home with metal scanners and bag checks. The real key to staying safe lies not with more intrusive security measures, but in prevention and enhanced community vigilance. We all have a collective role to play in looking out for potentially deviant or worrying behaviors and report possible threats in our midst. We do not want to turn our schools into fortresses which will create unease and stress amongst our staff and students. We also do not wish to paradoxically engender a siege mentality amongst students and staff, causing them to take extreme measures to protect themselves at the expense of a shared sense of security.
If you need someone to talk to or know someone who needs assistance, here are some organizations you can reach out to. Do take a screenshot of these numbers.
An update on the COVID-19 situation here. 136 new locally transmitted cases were confirmed today.
Out of the 81 linked cases, 36 are traced to the Jurong Fishery Port Cluster and 2 to the KTV cluster. There were also 3 imported cases reported today. More details will be released later tonight.
Possible easing of the current Phase 2 heightened alert restrictions for vaccinated people by early next month, as well as quarantine-free travel for returning travellers who are vaccinated.
Well, these are some of the nation's next steps in managing the pandemic shared by the 3 task force co-chairs in Parliament yesterday.
Let's recap the key points. In early next month, the midpoint of the P2HA period, restrictions will be reviewed and some curbs may be eased if the situation is under control. Any easing, though, will be extended only to vaccinated people.
And come September, when about 80% of the population are expected to have been fully vaccinated, further easing may take place, including quarantine-free travel for returning travellers who are vaccinated. Moving forward, Health Minister Ong Ye Kung said Singapore's healthcare protocols must be remodelled as we prepare to live with COVID-19, like a greater use of community care facilities, shorter stays at these facilities and hospitals, and home quarantine.
Let's talk more about this with Professor Teo Yik Ying, Dean of NUS's Saw Swee Hock School of Public Health. Welcome back to the show, Professor. We've seen a lower number of cases linked to the Jurong Fishery Port and KTV clusters compared with last week. But MOH reported 10 new clusters yesterday. Professor, how would you assess our current situation?
Thank you for having me back. So indeed, while the number of cases reported daily is still above 100, Singapore is actually in a much better state to handle these infections than, say, 6 months ago. And the reason is the vaccination of the people in Singapore continues on a healthy upward trajectory, where we have now around 55% of the population fully vaccinated and around another 20% having received their first dose. So we see that there are new clusters emerging daily. And that is very much a sign that the virus is still going about in our community. And because we have more and more people vaccinated now, some of these people may be infected, but because they have no symptoms or they have very mild symptoms, they themselves may not even know that they are infected and they still move about outside home. And this is the reason why we continue to see new clusters and also new unlinked cases as well. So if you ask how we are doing now, my answer is actually not to look at case numbers alone or even the number of clusters, but also where the infections are happening. Are they affecting children under the age of 12 who are still unvaccinated to the point that we see children infecting each other in schools, tuition centers, or at playgrounds? Are there more and more people who, because they were infected, that they now need to go into hospital to seek care? And I think based on some of these indicators that I mentioned, I actually think that the COVID situation in Singapore at the moment is one that is actually under control. But as I mentioned, we should continue to monitor whether the transmission chains are now entering the schools or other environments where children are in, as well as to really monitor our hospital situation carefully to make sure that there is no rising trend in the demand for limited resources such as oxygen or high dependency ICU beds.
Right. Well, let's look ahead to early August, Prof, the midpoint of this Phase 2 heightened alert period when a task force will review the rules. Do you think we are on track for some sort of easing?
So if we look from the basis of only just daily case numbers, the number of unlinked cases or the number of clusters like we talked about earlier on, then people would be wondering, why are we talking about easing the rules? But actually, when we look at the perspective, from the perspective of vaccination numbers across the whole of Singapore, the number of infected people who actually develop serious disease and require hospital care, and most importantly, if we also look at the signs of the vaccination, what it is telling us right now, I actually think that Singapore is in a very good position to start thinking about easing up our restrictions. And I mentioned the signs of vaccination as one of the most important factors. So let's perhaps just remind ourselves what exactly vaccination means, because I think there is still a lot of confusion and misunderstanding that's going about. So being vaccinated with the vaccines we have in Singapore from Pfizer and Moderna will significantly reduce the chance of a person being infected. it doesn't completely prevent a person from infection. But vaccination means that it makes a person less likely to be infected in the first place. Now, based on real-world data from Singapore and other countries, we know that if a vaccinated person does become infected, he or she is actually much less likely to develop severe disease to the point that require hospital care or even more serious complications that require oxygen or ICU beds. And we can see this in today's news, that out of the 18 people who require oxygen, 9 were unvaccinated and 9 were only partially vaccinated. None of those that require oxygen or in ICU were fully vaccinated. So vaccination really does protect a person by first lowering the chance of being infected, and second, lowering the chance of disease and severe complications if you do get infected after vaccination. So coming back to your question then on whether we are on track for some easing of the rules, the science tells us vaccination is able to reduce COVID-19 to something that is mild or even with no symptoms and with no short-term or long-term impact on our health. So actually by mid-August, I expect we will have more than 70% of our people fully vaccinated, maybe even 75%. And this puts us in a very good position to ease our restrictions in phases, not all in one go, but I do expect we will be on a path to regaining some of the freedom we had lost because of COVID.
Professor, casting further into the future when COVID-19 is endemic, one thing that Minister Ong brought up was the remodeling of our healthcare protocols. What do you think our healthcare system would look like? And do you think this remodeling would go beyond COVID-19 care?
So actually, Singapore's healthcare system has always been structured in a way to be resilient against surges while relying on the most up-to-date scientific evidence and data. So I'll use an example. Last year, when it was spreading very quickly within the migrant worker dormitories, we were seeing more than 1,000 new cases reported every day. But we used the science that young, healthy people, when infected, most of them have very little symptoms or even no symptoms. So we didn't need to put these people in our hospitals. So instead, we housed them in community care facilities. We relied on the use of oximeters to monitor these low-risk cases for any signs of worsening symptoms. And what that meant was that it allowed us to ring-fence our acute hospital beds for the high-risk COVID cases, as well as other non-COVID related needs. So looking ahead, especially with more people in the country vaccinated, I expect people who are infected are mostly going to be with mild or no symptoms, and that is the vaccine working to protect them. And in this situation, there's no need to house these people in hospitals if we have a way to monitor them, perhaps with the household distributed oximeters. They can self-isolate at home. And this is exactly why we are also switching tact to track the situation in hospitals. Now the numbers are not just the daily numbers of infected cases, but we also look at the number of infected people in the hospitals with severe complications that needs oxygen or even in high dependency or ICU care. So the data locally and internationally suggests that those requiring more severe hospital care or even dying from COVID-19 are much more likely to be those that are unvaccinated. So we may see some healthcare protocols changing to differentiate between vaccinated and unvaccinated people, but clearly without compromising on the quality of care and the health outcome for anyone, everyone. So instead of going all out to track every single case, we may switch to what we currently do with influenza, which is to perform some form of surveillance in the polyclinics where we selectively test people coming into the polyclinics so we understand what is the scale of the COVID-19 problem in the community and what are the circulating or dominant strains. The rest of the time, we may actually ask people to just test themselves or to isolate at home when in doubt. So clearly, there will be other ways that we will remodel the way we handle COVID-19 as a healthcare system. But the above are just some of the examples which I expect will be considered, perhaps not just in Singapore, but for any country that is able to deploy sufficient amount of vaccines to their people to treat COVID as endemic and to live with COVID.
Well, as always, thanks so much for your time and insights, Prof. We've been speaking with Professor Teo Yik Ying, who's Dean of the Salisbury Hawk School of Public Health at NUS.
In other headlines, a 17-year-old died after a basketball backboard structure fell on him last night. The incident happened on a court in Bedok South. The police said the teenager was unconscious when he was taken to the hospital, where he died from his injuries. Investigations into the case are ongoing. Earlier today, Deputy Prime Minister and MP for East Coast GRC Heng Swee Keat was seen at the basketball court speaking to residents. The Straits Times understands that DPM Heng had also visited the family of the victim to offer assistance.
Singapore-based payments firm Noom raised more than $200 million in fresh funds, joining the unicorn club of startups valued at more than $1 billion. It plans to use the funds to expand in the US and Latin America before pursuing an IPO in the US in 18 to 24 months.
Naomi Osaka, home favorite in Tokyo, who led the Olympic cauldron just a few nights ago, is out of the competition.
She was defeated by the Czech Republic's Markéta Vondrousová 6-1, 6-4. Speaking about the loss, she said, quote, "This one sucks more than the others."
Better news for Team Singapore, with shuttler Yeo Jia Min needing just 25 minutes to win her opening match. Ranked 30th in the world, she'll next play world number 18 Kim Ga-yeon tomorrow for a place in the round of 16.
Yu Mengyu scored a major upset earlier today, beating 8th-ranked Taiwanese Chun Yi-ching. Yu will play her round of 16 match in just a short while at 6:30 p.m. Singapore time.
For complete coverage of Team Singapore at the Olympics, visit our microsite at straitstimes.com/Tokyo Olympics.
Well, those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quay. Join us tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.